You think someone like you has $1 million just sitting in an account here? Prove it or get out. The branch manager's voice rang across the marble-floored lobby like a gunshot in a cathedral, sharp and echoing off the high ceilings, loud enough for every customer in the bank to turn their heads, their conversations dying mid-sentence, their eyes locking onto the scene unfolding at the teller counter. A man in a plain white T-shirt that hung loosely on his frame and faded jeans that spoke of a morning spent walking the city streets rather than boardrooms stood perfectly still there, his posture unchanging, holding his ID and bank card in one hand with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced storms far worse than this. His shoulders didn't rise in defense. His jaw didn't clench in anger, but if you looked closely into his deep brown eyes, you'd see something shift, a subtle hardening, like steel cooling under pressure. In exactly 12 minutes from that very moment, every single employee inside that Summit Bank branch would be fired, their careers unraveling like threads pulled from a seam. And none of them, not a one, had the faintest idea that the man they had just humiliated in front of a room full of strangers was not just any customer, but their ultimate boss, the man who signed their paychecks, the architect of their entire world. Before we dive headfirst into the full, heart-pounding story that's about to unfold, I want to pause right here and connect with you, the person watching this right now. Where are you tuning in from today? Is it the bustling streets of New York, the sunny beaches of Miami, or maybe a quiet suburb in the Midwest? Drop your city in the comments below. We truly want to hear from you, to know the corners of the world this tale is reaching. And if this opening hook has stirred even the smallest spark in you, a flicker of curiosity or righteous fire, do me a favor. Hit that like button to let the algorithm know this matters, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We drop stories like this every week, real-life reckonings that remind us why standing up counts. Your support keeps these narratives alive and spreading. All right, with that quick breath of fresh air, let's step through those gleaming glass doors and head inside the Summit Bank branch at 1789 Oak Street in downtown Portland, where on a deceptively quiet Thursday morning at precisely 11:15 a.m., the forces of bias, unchecked arrogance, and raw, unyielding power collide in a way that would echo far beyond those walls. The man standing at the counter, the one drawing all those stares, was Jamal Washington, 52 years old, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed neat but unpretentious, and a gaze that could hold a room without trying. You wouldn't have guessed it from his clothes. No one would have. That simple white T-shirt could have come from any thrift store rack. Those jeans from a decade ago, scuffed at the knees from real life, not designer distress. But beneath that unassuming exterior beat the heart of the CEO of Summit Financial Holdings, the sprawling conglomerate that owned not just this branch, but hundreds across the country, a financial empire valued in the tens of billions. Jamal Washington was personally worth over $22 billion, a fortune built not on inheritance or silver spoons, but on grit, late nights, and a relentless drive to level the playing field in an industry that often stacked the deck against people who looked like him. Yet that morning, he hadn't arrived in a tailored three-piece suit from Savile Row, nor in polished Italian loafers that clicked authoritatively on the floor. No entourage of bodyguards shadowed his steps. No personal assistant hovered with a tablet in hand. He was just a man dressed like anyone else you might pass on the sidewalk. Ordinary, approachable, invisible in the best way possible. Because Jamal wasn't there for a photo op or a power play. He had been going undercover at this very branch for weeks, slipping in unannounced, testing the waters of his own creation. It all started in his corner office high above the city, where the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Willamette River like a living painting. For months, his team had been fielding anonymous complaints pouring in from Reddit threads buried in subforums like r/banking horror stories and r/Portland local, and viral X posts that painted a damning picture. Stories of minority customers being mistreated right here at this branch, interrogated like criminals over routine deposits, accused of fraud without a shred of evidence, turned away with smirks and sideways glances that said more than words ever could. One post described a young Latina entrepreneur waiting 3 hours for a simple account verification, only to be told her profile didn't match the expected customer base. Another detailed a black father in khakis and a polo being asked to step outside for a security check, while white customers breezed through. Jamal didn't believe in handling these. From afar, in sterile corporate investigations run by suits who never set foot in a lobby. No, he believed in the raw truth, the kind you could only see with your own eyes, feel in your gut, taste like bitter regret. So he had come himself week after week, posing as just another face in the crowd, withdrawing small amounts, making deposits, watching, listening, hoping against hope that the reports were exaggerated, that his vision for an inclusive bank had taken root. And now, on this ordinary Thursday, the truth was staring back at him from behind the glass counter, full of contempt, disbelief, and a smug certainty that he didn't belong. "I'm here made withdrawal," Jamal said, his voice calm as a still lake, sliding his bank card and ID across the polished glass counter with a gentle push, the plastic whispering against the surface. $2.5 million wire transfer. The words hung in the air like a challenge, simple and straightforward, but the room fell into a hush deeper than before. Conversations at the adjacent counters trailed off, heads turning subtly, the faint hum of the air conditioning suddenly the loudest sound in the space. Behind the counter stood branch manager Karen Whitaker, 58 years old, her hair pulled into a severe bun that matched the sharp lines of her navy blazer, her lipstick a bold red slash that seemed to dare anyone to question her authority. She arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow, her gaze raking over Jamal from head to toe, not with professional curiosity, but with the slow, dissecting appraisal of someone who had already decided the verdict. She didn't touch the card. It sat there, untouched, like an offering rejected at an altar. "A $2.5 million," she repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism, a smirk curling at the very edge of her mouth like smoke from a hidden fire. "In that outfit?" The tone wasn't just doubting. It was cruel, laced with a condescension that sliced through the air, implying not just impossibility, but absurdity, as if the very idea of wealth in his hands was a joke they were all in on. Jamal didn't blink, didn't shift his weight, didn't let a single muscle betray the storm brewing inside. He simply nodded, his expression as even as the horizon. "Yes, for my summit account." That's when the intercom crackled to life, and teller Brian Hayes, 39 years old, with a tie slightly askew and a name tag pinned crookedly to his vest, leaned into microphone, his voice booming through the lobby speakers loud enough to make an elderly couple at the end of the line jump. "Sir, we'll need to re-verify your identity. Check your ID again. We've had scammers dressed like that before." The words landed like pebbles into a pond, rippling out, and from the back of the line, near the faux ficus plants by the waiting area, a low bubble of laughter rose, nervous at first, then bolder, a few chuckles joining like accomplices. Jamal's heart didn't race. His pulse stayed steady, a metronome of control. But inside, a slow flame was kindling, fed by memories he thought he'd buried deep. "My ID is valid," he said, his tone unchanged, measured, extending the card a fraction closer. "So is my account." Brian didn't even bother glancing at his computer screen, the glow of it reflecting off his glasses as he smirked into Mike. "You'll need to provide proof of funds," he said smugly, the word proof drawn out like an accusation, "and maybe change your story." Karen crossed her arms over her chest, her gold bracelet clinking softly, a barrier of finality. "Unless you're here to cause trouble." But it didn't stop there. It got worse, twisting deeper into the marrow of the moment. Teller Emily Klein, 35 years old, with blonde highlights and manicure that screamed weekend spa days, leaned forward over her station, her eyes narrowing as she snatched Jamal's card from the counter without so much as a glance at the details. She slid it into her drawer with deliberate slowness, then locked it with sharp metallic click that echoed like a gavel falling. "This card looks suspicious," she said, her voice pitched just high enough to carry, laced with a faint concern that fooled no one. "Honestly, you probably stole it. You need to leave." The statement landed like a slap in the face, not just to Jamal, whose breath caught for the briefest instant, but to everyone watching, the air thickening with second-hand shock. One woman in line, a middle-aged accountant clutching her briefcase, gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. A man near the potted plants, in a rumpled suit from a long commute, whispered his companion, "Did she really just say that? Out loud?" And from the side of the room, where the velvet ropes marked the deposit line, A phone lifted smoothly, its camera lens glinting under the fluorescent lights. That phone belonged to Sophia Bennett, 36 years old, a white marketing consultant with a sharp bob haircut and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, a regular customer who knew the rhythms of this branch like the back of her hand. She had heard enough. The casual venom, the unchecked entitlement, and her blood boiled a way that overrode her usual reserve. She tapped record with a thumb that didn't tremble, framing the count on her shot, and said loud and clear, her voice steady as steel, "This is racism at Summit Bank, plain and simple. And it's going online right now." She uploaded the clip to X without a single hashtag, without fanfare, but those raw words were enough to ignite the fuse. Liam Foster, a 40-year-old journalist with wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook perpetually in his pocket, standing just behind her in line, joined in without missing a beat, pulling out his own phone to capture the widening scene. "Get his name," Sophia told him urgently, her eyes flicking between the counter and the growing murmur. "We're documenting everything, every word, every glance." Meanwhile, across the teller line, a young teller named Nia Johnson, 32 years old, with warm brown skin and braids pulled back in a practical ponytail, stood frozen in disbelief behind her station. She had worked at this branch for 2 long years, always under Karen's stern, unyielding management, the kind that measured performance in quotas and quashed questions with a single arched brow. But this was different, a line crossing the territory that made her stomach twist. "He has every right to be here," Nia said softly at first, her voice barely above the hum of the lobby, but gaining strength as she met Karen's glare. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're not paid to argue," she hissed, low and venomous. Nia didn't back down. She stepped forward instead, her sensible flat scuffing lightly on the tile, her voice rising just enough to cut through. "Anyway, I am paid to follow policy, and you're breaking it, every single one." The room tense like a wire pulled taut, the air heavy with unspoken alliances fracturing. Emily sneered at Nia from her station, her lips curling in disdain. "You don't know who this guy is. He's trying to scam us, can't you see it?" Jamal turned slowly then, his movements deliberate, first to Emily with her locked drawer, then to Karen with her crossed arms, and finally back to the spot where his car now lay captive. "You're ruining Summit," he said quietly, his words not shout but scalpel, precise and piercing. "This isn't about me. It's about you, all of you, and the poison you let fester here." The lobby seemed to hold its collective breath, the weight of his statement settling like dust after an explosion. To understand the depth of that quiet fury in Jamal's eyes, we have to step back in time, flash back to 28 years ago, when Jamal was just 32, fresh out of grad school with a Harvard MBA still crisp in its framed back at his tiny apartment, his dreams as big as the Texas sky. He had walked into a small community bank in Austin, hoping to withdraw the down payment for his first investment property, a modest duplex he planned to flip into affordable housing for families like the one he'd grown up in. He wore jeans that day, too, clean but casual, and he carried an honest smile, the kind that lit up his face when he talked about his vision. But the teller behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with a name tag reading Betty and a perpetual frown etched into her forehead, didn't see potential. She saw only a young black man dressed like, what? A thug? A risk? Her eyes flicked over him, then to the screen, and suddenly the transaction froze. "Funds under investigation," she said flatly, as if reading from a script designed for moments like this. "You'll need to return with proper documentation. A suit, maybe, or a lawyer to vouch." He had stood there, the rejection burning like acid, the lobby around him blurring as he fought the urge to demand why. It took 2 more visits, one in borrowed slacks from a friend and another with a cousin posing as his advisor, before they processed a withdrawal without a hitch. That moment never left him. It lodged in his chest like shrapnel, planting a seed of fire that grew into Summit Financial Holdings, a fortress of finance built to ensure no one else would ever feel that sting of dismissal based on a glance. And now, here he stood, 2 decades later, in the heart of his own creation, facing the same rot he had sworn to eradicate, the same assumptions bubbling up like weeds through cracks in the foundation he thought he'd sealed. Back in the present, in that charged Portland lobby. Karen's hand moved subtly under the desk, her fingers pressing a discreet button that logged a silent alert into the system. Possible fraud. Escalate immediately. She turned to Brian with a nod sharp as a blade. Call it in if he doesn't leave. Now. Brian's voice shook the room again to the intercom, amplified and unyielding. Final warning, sir. Leave now or we escalate to law enforcement. The threat hung heavy. The word, sir, twisted into something mocking. Jamal didn't move an inch, his feet planted firm on the cool marble. Instead, he pulled out his phone from his jeans pocket. Not to record the spectacle, not to plead his case to the digital ether, but to dial a number saved under a simple L. "Lena," he said when his assistant answered on the first ring, her voice a lifeline cutting through the noise. "Activate the internal system." On the other end of the line, in a sleek office 20 floors up, Lena Vasquez, Jamal's right hand for a decade, didn't hesitate. Her voice came through clear and composed, an anchor in the storm. "It's live, Mr. Washington. We're monitoring everything, audio, video, logs. Say the word, and we move." Jamal's gaze swept the counter. "Not yet," he replied, low enough that only the phone caught it. But the fuse was lit, the countdown ticking in his mind. Nia stepped forward again, her heart pounding visibly in her chest, blocking Emily from the drawer with her body like a human shield. "You locked his car without justification," she said, her voice gaining edges of steel now. Policy quotes flashing in her mind from the training videos she'd watched 100 times. "You could lose your job for this. Protocol demands verification first, not assumption." Emily rolled her eyes, a dramatic flare that only amplified her dismissal. "I'm not worried. He doesn't belong here." Karen snapped then, her patience fraying like old rope. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself, Nia and the branch." Liam caught that exchange too on his video, his thumb steady on record as he narrated softly into his phone. She's protecting the customer, standing up against her own boss. And now the manager's turning on her. This is violating your own code of conduct, word for word. More customers began murmuring, the tension thickening like fog rolling in off the river. One man in a flannel shirt, a construction worker on his lunch break, said aloud, his voice gravelly with disbelief, "Is this how you treat all black men in jeans? Like criminals before you've even run the scan?" Karen responded without hesitation, her chin lifting in defiance. "We treat suspicious behavior the same, no matter the color. It's policy." But the words rang hollow even to her, and Jamal's face remained a mask of calm, though his fingers curled slightly into a loose fist at his side, the only tell the thunder building within. "You'll regret this, Karen," he said evenly, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "All of you will." And then came the small twist, the first crack in the facade, subtle but seismic. Liam, ever the journalist, leaned over the counter just a fraction, close enough to peer the drawer before Emily could slam it fully shut again. But in that split second, he read the name embossed on the bank card. He said it loud enough for the room to hear, his voice pitching up in surprise. "Jamal Washington. This card says Jamal Washington." There was a pause, heavy and electric, the kind that sucks the oxygen from a space. Then a sharp intake of breath from someone near the front, a whisper rippling like wind through dry grass. "Wait, that Jamal Washington?" The name hung there, familiar to anyone who followed finance news. The reclusive billionaire, the philanthropist who funded HBCU scholarships, the man whose face graced Forbes covers but whose personal life stayed shrouded. Jamal stood a little taller now, his posture shifting imperceptibly, not in triumph, but in quiet readiness. He didn't reveal who he was. Not yet, not in a shout or flourish. But the room had shifted with him. The tension that had pinned him like a specimen under glass was turning, slowly, inexorably, toward the counter. And Karen felt it, deep in her gut, a cold prickle of unease she masked with a fresh layer of bluster. The silence that followed Liam's reading of the name, Jamal Washington, didn't last long. It shattered under the weight of Karen's denial. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, a micro-twitch of doubt, fear, or perhaps the dimmest spark of recognition, but she buried it quickly beneath a veneer of growing hostility, her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned to Emily and hissed under her breath, urgent and commanding, "Lock the drawer. Don't let anyone near that card again. Treat it like evidence." Emily, emboldened by the chaos swirling around her, pressed her palm flat against the top of the drawer, as if it held state secrets or a ticking bomb, her knuckles whitening. "This card's suspicious," she snapped again, her eyes darting toward Nia with accusatory fire. "And so, is he? We asked him to leave. That's final." Then her voice rose, sharp and piercing, cutting through the lobby like a siren. "You heard me, sir. Leave now." The word "sir" was laced with sarcasm, so thick it dripped, turning courtesy into a weapon. Brian didn't hesitate this time. Adrenaline and authority surged through him like a current. He stepped around the counter, his polished shoes squeaking on the marble, and gripped Jamal's elbow tightly, his fingers digging in just enough to bruise. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be," he said through clenched teeth, his breath hot and close, the faint scent of his morning coffee lingering. "This isn't a place for you to act out. Time to go." Customers began gasping, a chorus of sharp inhales rippling through the line. Some stepped back instinctively, unsure if a fight was brewing in this sanctuary of suits and statements, while others surged forward, their faces flushing with offense at the raw display of force. "He's a client," one man shouted, a burly barista in an apron who had just cashed his tips, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. "You can't put hands on him like he's some shoplifter." But Brian, fueled by Karen's silent nod from behind the counter, a quick jerk of her head like a puppet master, kept his grip firm, his jaw set, under her breath, just loud enough for Jamal to hear over the rising din. Emily muttered, "You don't belong here." The word, the venomous aside, meant to sting deep. That did it. The final spark igniting the dry tinder of years of swallowed slights. "Let go of me," Jamal said, his voice calm but thunderous, resonating from his chest like distant rolling clouds. At the exact same moment, Nia shoved her way between Brian and Jamal, her slight frame a defiant barrier, her hands outstretched in plea and protection. "You can't touch him," she cried, her voice cracking with raw emotion, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes but not falling. "His account is valid. You haven't even looked at the screen, not once." Brian's face reddened as if being challenged by a junior teller, a 32-year-old with less seniority than his coffee break, added insult to the mounting injury. "This isn't your call, Nia," he growled, his grip loosening just a fraction but not releasing. Karen snapped from her perch, her voice a whip crack. "He's a fraud. You'll find that out soon enough. Mark my words." And then an explosion from the far side of the lobby, where Liam had positioned himself for the widest shot. "This is injustice," he shouted, now switching seamlessly to a live stream on Reddit, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "They're physically removing a customer with no evidence, no verification. This is racism on full display at Summit Bank, unfolding right here in downtown Portland." The live stream captured it all. The gasps in the crowd, the overlapping voices rising in protest, even the squeak of shoes as more customers shuffled forward to block Brian's path, their bodies forming an impromptu phalanx. Sophia added fuel to the fire, her own phone held high like a torch. The whole country's going to see this. Every second, every shove. A woman in a blue dress near the door, her silver earrings catching the light, muttered to the person beside her, "This is exactly what happened to my brother last year. Denied a simple transfer because he didn't look the part." The temperature of the room had changed irrevocably. What started as a private humiliation was now a public inferno, bleeding out through screens and cameras into the wider world, where outrage was already coalescing, shares ticking up by the dozen, to grasp the full weight of Jamal's restraint in that moment, the way he held back the tide of his own anger. We need another flashback, this one to when he was just 22, a skinny kid with big dreams and an even bigger chip on his shoulder. It was a humid summer afternoon in his hometown, the air thick with the scent of jasmine from his grandmother's garden. He had walked into a small local branch with her savings bond clutched in his hand, a crisp certificate meant for his college fund, her name and signature scrawled in faded blue ink across the bottom. The teller, an older white woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked at his dark skin, his oversized hoodie borrowed from his uncle, and then at the bond. Instead of processing it, she tilted her head and asked, slow and patronizing, Are you running an errand for someone, young man? This looks like it belongs to an adult. When he straightened up and said no, firm as he could, that it was his grandmother's, hers to cash for him, she didn't believe him. She called over a manager, a balding man in an ill-fitting suit, who scrutinized the document like it was forged on the spot. They never cashed it that day. His grandmother, frail but fierce at 68, had to come in herself the next morning, her cane tapping the floor like judgment. Even with her presence, the questions lingered. Are you sure this is legitimate? The humiliation burning into Jamal's memory like a brand. The sting of being questioned, dismissed, invalidated over and over, not for what he did, but for who he was. And now, all these years later, that same flavor of doubt was being served up fresh. Only this time in a bank he had built from the ground up, a legacy meant to defy such shadows. Back in the lobby, Jamal didn't resist Brian's grip, but he didn't yield either. He planted his feet, becoming an unmovable force. I came to withdraw my money, he said, his words measured, each one landing with precision. You've now accused me of theft, confiscated my card, and put hands on me without cause. This will not go unanswered, not by me, not by Summit. Karen rolled her eyes, a theatrical dismissal that only amplified her unraveling control. Oh, please, you're a threat, and we're following protocol to the letter. Protocol? Nia snapped back, her voice no longer soft, fire flashing in her eyes as she refused to step aside. No, you're abusing power, twisting it to fit your biases. Karen leaned toward her then, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for Nia's ears, but laced with threat. I warned you once. Keep this up, and you're next on the list. Nia blinked, stunned by the raw malice, the personal edge. Then her expression changed, like something inside her had cracked wide open, releasing a flood of long-buried truths. I've seen you do this before, she said aloud now, her voice no longer trembling, projecting for the whole lobby to hear. Last year, a black customer came in asking to speak with a loan officer. You made him wait an hour in that corner chair, fidgeting under those lights, then denied him without even checking his file. Just a quick glance and it doesn't qualify. That made Karen flinch for the first time, a visible twitch at the corner of her mouth, her facade cracking like thin ice. Sophia stepped closer, her camera zooming in. Wait! You've had complaints like this before? Buried them? Nia nodded, her braids swaying with emotion, emboldened by the eyes on her. She buried them. All of them. Shredding copies, deleting logs. I tried to flag one once, and she... Customers began murmuring louder, the buzz growing into a wave. One older man in a tweed jacket, his face lined with years of quiet observation, said, You people think you could do anything behind a title. Hide it all in fine print. Another woman, a teacher by the look of her sensible cardigan, added her voice. My dad's account was frozen here last month without cause. Said it was suspicious activity, but his transactions were the same as always. And then Liam, still streaming, spoke directly into his phone, his words a rallying cry. For anyone watching this live on Reddit, this isn't an isolated case, a one-off bad day. This is systemic, rotten at the core, and this branch is ground zero for problem. Jamal, hearing that cascade of shared pain, turned slightly to face the room. Not as a so he hid, not yet, but as a man who had lived this script too many times, the lines etched into his soul. They think they're untouchable, he said, his voice carrying to the back, not aimed at Karen but at the people, the witnesses. They believe appearance equals legitimacy, that a t-shirt disqualifies you from dignity. They mistaken arrogance for authority, and it's blinding them to the cliff they're walking toward. At that precise moment, Lena's voice came to the phone in Jamal's pocket, quiet but steady, a digital whisper only he could hear fully. Internal system is live, Jamal. We're capturing audio, video, customer testimony, everything. You have full authorization from the board. Just say when. He didn't answer aloud, pocketing the phone with subtle motion. Instead, he locked eyes with Emily across the counter. Return my card, he said, the word simple but edged now, no longer soft-spoken invitation. Emily froze, her hand hovering near the drawer key, uncertainty flickering. No, she stammered, but it was weaker. Return it, he repeated, his eyes hard as flint, the calm giving way to command. You've made your point. You've crossed every line imaginable. She shook her head, stubborn to the end. We're not done here, not until you leave. Sophia pointed a manicured finger at her, unwavering. You should be. You're being recorded right now. Every threat, every lock of that drawer. Liam chimed in, his live stream chat exploding in real time. Reddit's watching. Thousands tuning in by the second. You're going viral, and not in the good way. Karen looked panicked for just a moment, her bun loosening a strand, sweat beating at her temple, then snapped back with false bravado. Everyone, put your phones away. This is private property. But no one listened. The crowd grew bolder, a living wall of defiance. One woman in line, her voice quivering but resolute, said, You owe him an apology now, before this escalates further. Another man, tall and broad-shouldered, asked the air, Where's corporate when you need them? This can't stand. Karen barked back, her voice fraying at the edges. We are corporate here. This is our house. Jamal smiled faintly then, a ghost of a curve on his lips, not cruel but knowing. Not for long. Brian, still standing beside him, his grip now slack and awkward, hesitated openly. This is going too far, he muttered to Karen under his breath, his confidence ebbing like a receding tide. We can't keep pushing this. He's not backing down. But Karen ignored him, raising her voice again in a desperate bid for control. This man is not who he says he is. Not a client, not Jamal Washington. He's an actor, a plant. That was when a medium twist struck, a revelation blooming in the chaos like a flower in cracked concrete. Nia, her hand still outstretched protectively, stepped forward trembling but brave, her fingers flying across her side screen to pull up the system interface. The glow illuminated her determined face as she typed furiously, cross-referencing the account in real time. I looked him up, she said, her voice loud and clear now, projecting over the din for all to hear. His account is real, and it's massive, 7 figures minimum. He's not just a client. He's a top-tier executive account holder, flagged for VIP handling. Silence crashed down like a wave, swallowing the murmurs whole. Karen's mouth dropped open slightly, a rare vulnerability. Brian stared at the floor, his cheeks burning. Emily's face went pale as milk, her hand finally fumbling for the drawer key. Sophia let out a breathless, "Oh my God," her camera zooming in on Nia's screen. And then Jamal spoke again, still holding his phone loosely in one hand, his voice a quiet thunder. You're going to regret this, not because of who I am, but because of who you've chosen to be today, tomorrow, and every day you wield that power without mercy. And now I want to turn it over to you, the viewer holding the story in your hands. If you had been standing in that lobby, right there amid the marble and the mounting outrage, hearing Jamal being called a fraud, being shoved toward the door, having his very identity stripped away layer by layer, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up, your voice joining Nia's in the fray? Would you have stepped between him and the exit, phone raised like a shield? Or would the fear of reprisal, the what-ifs of your own life, have kept you silent? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice is powerful, a thread in the tapestry of change, and the story is only just beginning to unravel its deeper layers. Security code red. Karen barked suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip's crack. Even though no security officer patrolled that small branch, it was a bluff, a desperate scare tactic yanked from some half-remembered training manual, meant to push Jamal out before the tide fully turned. "Remove him now," she screamed, her eyes locked on Brian with manic intensity. But Brian's hesitation was etched in his shoulders, his stance slumping under the weight of doubt. Still, obedience died hard. He obeyed, lunging forward again with misplaced vigor, his hands shoving Jamal hard in the chest, the force sending a ripple through his T-shirt. "He's a fraud," Emily shouted through the intercom speaker then, her voice booming to the entire lobby like a public service announcement gone wrong, distorted and amplified for maximum humiliation. "This man is impersonating a client. Do not assist him. Do not engage." Customers froze in horror, the elderly woman by the door clutching her purse tighter, her knuckles white, whispering to no one in particular. What in the world is happening here? This isn't a bank anymore, it's a circus. Jamal stumbled backward one step. Just one, his heel catching the edge of a welcome mat, and steadied himself against the glass door, the cool surface pressing into his palm. He didn't yell, didn't lash out with fists or fury. He simply raised his eyes toward the intercom speaker mounted high on the wall and exhaled slowly, deeply, as if steadying the volcano roiling inside him, the pressure building to eruption. "Don't do this," Nia pleaded to Karen, stepping in front of Jamal once more, her body a fragile but fierce bulwark. "You've gone too far already. That announcement was slander, pure and simple, and it's on record now." But Karen didn't care. Her voice had risen to a fever pitch, shrill and unhinged. "I run this branch, not some man off the street pretending he owns an account here. We don't serve people like him. Not today, not ever." At that raw admission, the final fuse was well and truly lit, the spark racing down the line. Sophia, visibly shaking with a rage that turned her cheeks pink, shouted from behind her camera, "That's enough? You just told the whole room. He doesn't belong. On what grounds? His skin? His clothes? Say it plain." Liam, still live streaming to a Reddit audience now swelling past 1,000 viewers, panned his phone across the room in a sweeping arc. This is a banking hate crime happening live in downtown Portland. Share this stream. Save the clip. Spread the word. We're witnessing history, ugly and unfiltered. Customers in the background began to murmur again, but this time angrily, a low rumble building like thunder. A young Latino man in a graphic tee, his backpack slung low, stepped forward from the line, his voice steady with shared resolve. "I've been treated the same way at this bank. Questioned, delayed, made to feel small. This is no accident. It's the air they breathe here." The room grew tense with that shared electricity, bodies shifting closer, alliances forming in glances and nods. Karen, sensing the shift like a captain feeling the deck tilt, tried to redirect the narrative with frantic energy. "He's being aggressive now, physically confrontational. Refuse and comply," she snapped, pointing a trembling finger. But the customers weren't buying it anymore. The spell of authority had shattered. "No, you're the confrontational one," said a woman near the exit, her arms crossed, voice dripping with sarcasm, shouting through a mic while a grown man stands there being humiliated like he's less than dirt. "We see it. We all see it clear as day." Flashback again to Jamal at 38, a rising star in finance with his first major deal under his belt. A $75 million funding round for a tech startup focused on underserved communities. He had just closed it, the ink barely dry on contracts, and entered a high-end bank in Chicago to open a business line of credit. Dressed well for once in a button-down and slacks, speaking confidently about expansion plans. Still, the bank manager, a slick type with a Rolex glinting under cufflinks, asked him 3 times if he was authorized to use the account. Despite Jamal's name being stamped on every page of the corporate paperwork, his signature a flourish of pride. "I just need to verify you're not fronting for someone else," the manager had said, that coded language, fronting, hanging in the air like smoke, implying shadows where there were none. It haunted Jamal, that reminder that no amount of success, no corner office or closing bell, would fully insulate him from the assumptions lurking just beneath the surface, ready to rise like ghosts. That same doubt was echoing again now, amplified over loudspeakers for all to hear, turning personal slight into public spectacle. Back in the lobby, Jamal's voice was no longer just calm. It was firm, a pillar amid the storm. "You've slandered my name across this entire space. You violated banking protocol at every turn, refused service, confiscated property, humiliated me in front of witnesses." Brian's grip finally loosened completely. He stepped back, uncertainty clouding his face like fog, his hands hovering awkwardly at his sides. I just followed orders," he muttered, the words tumbling out like an apology half-formed. "You put your hands on me," Jamal replied, unyielding. "You physically pushed a client, twice now, without a single fact to back it." Nia stood beside him, trembling but fierce, her chest rising and falling with adrenaline. "I've submitted an internal ethics report," she told Karen directly, her voice steady as she tapped her screen one last time. "They'll get today. flag priority, and this time, someone will read it. Someone who matters. Karen let out a bitter laugh, sharp and hollow, echoing off the walls. Your career's over the moment this ends, Nia. You're siding with a scammer, throwing away everything for a stranger. Nia turned to the crowd then, her eyes sweeping the faces, drawing them in. He's not a scammer. He's a valued client with every right. And even if he wasn't, even if he walked in with nothing, you don't treat anyone like this. Not here, not ever. Sophia nodded fiercely, her camera never wavering. She's right. This is systemic abuse baked into the walls, and it stops today right here. Suddenly, a line formed, not at the teller counter for transactions, but a human chain between Jamal and the exit doors, a barrier of solidarity. 5 customers at first, including Sophia with her phone aloft and Liam narrating the shift, stepped forward to block Brian's path, their bodies a testament to quiet courage. One man crossed his arms over his broad chest. No one is dragging this man out of here, not on my watch. Another added, his voice gruff, if he leaves under force, we all leave. Close our accounts on the spot. A woman in heels, her purse swinging like a pendulum, pulled out her phone anew. I'm emailing the State Banking Commission right now. CCNG the news desks. Jamal stepped forward again amid the protective ring, the crowd thickening around him like roots anchoring a tree. You have one last chance, he said to Karen, his tone even but laced with finality, to walk this back, to apologize sincerely, to admit you were wrong from the start. Karen crossed her arms tighter, her nails digging into her sleeves. I'd rather be fired than apologize to someone who walked in here thinking he could manipulate us with lies and theatrics. Jamal looked at her then, really looked, past the bluster to fear flickering beneath, then at Emily with her pale face, Brian with his downcast eyes, and finally at Nia, whose stand had cost her nothing yet gained her everything. You're not the only ones being recorded, he said, raising his phone slightly, the screen glowing with active lines. You're being documented, logged, witnessed by eyes far beyond this room. And this branch? It's being reviewed at the highest level right now. Karen laughed again, but it was brittle, cracking at the edges. By who? Corporate's not watching this little drama. It's just another Thursday. And that's when a large twist hit, a thunderclap in the tension. Sophia turned her camera directly on Jamal, her voice cutting through like a lifeline. Sir, who are you, really? Give us your name, for the record. The room fell silent again, breaths held collectively. For a long moment, Jamal didn't answer, letting the question settle. Then he simply said, his voice low but resonant, You'll find out very soon. Trust me on that. Nia's eyes widened, pieces clicking into place. She had suspected from the account details, the VIP flags, but now it was clear as daylight. This man wasn't just another client fighting for scraps of dignity. Karen squinted, confusion warring with denial. What's your name? Tell us straight, she demanded, her voice pitching higher. Jamal didn't flinch, didn't raise his volume. He nodded toward Liam instead. You already heard it, he said evenly. You just didn't listen, none of you did. And the crowd gasped again, a collective intake that sucked the air from the space. Someone near the plants whispered urgently, He's Jamal Washington, the Jamal Washington. Another voice from a woman in scrubs rose, the CEO of Summit. Sophia dropped her phone for a split second, shock widening her eyes. No way, that can't be right, can it? And then Liam, still holding the live stream steady, said it aloud, his words tumbling out in realization. Wait a minute. Jamal Washington, the owner of Summit Bank, the billionaire behind the whole group. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum where sound should have been, broken only by the faint whir of the AC. Karen's jaw went slack, her red lipstick stark against paling skin. Brian stepped back like he'd touched a live wire, his hands up in surrender. Emily staggered toward the drawer, fumbling blindly for the key, her breath coming in short bursts. No, she whispered, more to herself than anyone. This is a setup, a cruel joke. Nia exhaled sharply, tears rising in her eyes not from sadness, but from profound vindication, the rightness of it all washing over her. Sophia turned her phone to the crowd, framing the frozen tableau. You're watching the moment a bank branch tried to expel its own owner for looking like he didn't belong, for daring to be ordinary. Jamal looked around the room then, not with arrogance or gloating, but with something deeper, more poignant. A kind of quiet grief etched in the lines around his eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen again, he said softly, his voice carrying to every corner. Not here in my bank, the one I built to be different. And now I'll turn it to you watching this unfold on your screen. What would you have done if you were standing in that branch at that very moment? The air thick with revelation. Would you have stayed quiet, head down in the line? Or would you have stood between Jamal and the people trying to erase him, your voice a brick in the wall of justice? Leave your answer in the comments. Be honest, be bold. Silence helps no one. It's the echo that haunts. The air inside the Summit Bank lobby had turned electric, dense and volatile, moments from combustion, every breath shared, every glance loaded. Karen's confidence was cracking like parched earth, fissures running through her posture, but she wasn't done fighting. Not yet, not while breath remained. This is an impersonation scheme, she yelled, desperate now, her voice thin and frantic, cracking on the edges as she pointed a shaking finger. He's not who he says he is. Don't listen to this man. Don't buy the act. She turned to Brian with a jerking nod, commanding through the panic. Push him out now, end this. Brian didn't move at first. He looked like he wanted to melt into floor, to vanish under the counter where the safe hummed indifferently. But Karen barked again, louder, her bun unraveling further, strands framing her wild eyes. Move him, do your job. And Brian obeyed, his jaw clenched tight, his hands balled into fists at his sides, regret already shadowing his features. He lunged forward harder than before, slamming his forearm into Jamal's chest with a thud that echoed, driving him back toward the entrance doors, the glass rattling faintly from the impact. The room gasped as one, a ripple of voices surging in protest. Chairs screeched as people rose. Phones lifted higher, flashes popping like distant lightning. "Hey, get your hands off him!" Someone shouted from near the front desk, a voice raw with fury. But the damage was already done, the shove landing with bruising force. Jamal stumbled back, colliding with the glass door, his breath catching sharp at his throat, the cool pain pressing against his back like a judge's gavel. Nia ran forward instantly, shielding him with her body, hands outstretched wide. "Stop it," she cried, her voice breaking but carrying across the space. "He's your CEO, Jamal Washington, the owner." Her words hung there, a bombshell in the bedlam. The entire room froze, time suspending in that revelation. Brian's hand dropped limp to his side, his face draining of color. Emily stood still, frozen in disbelief, her mouth agape. Karen's lips parted, a whisper escaping. What did you say?" Nia turned slowly to face her boss, her chest heaving, eyes blazing. "You heard me. That's Jamal Washington, the owner of Summit Bank, the man whose vision built this place, the man whose card you locked away like stolen property, the man you just tried to shove out of his own damn branch like trash." Sophia's camera trembled now, not from her steady hands, but from the sheer energy surging through the room like a current, electric and alive. Liam muttered into the live stream, all threading his voice, "Oh my God, it's real. She just said it." She confirmed out loud. And the lobby erupted then, not in confusion, but in a roar of rage and vindication. Customers began shouting, voices overlapping in a cacophony of justice. "He's the CEO. You tried to assault your own CEO. What the hell?" One man yelled, his face red. "You need to be arrested right now," said another, a woman in pearls, her phone dialing 911. A young woman in a green blazer stepped between Jamal and Brian, holding up her phone like a shield, her voice steady. "You're not touching him again, not ever." Two more customers flanked her instantly. Then three, a line forming not just symbolic, but physical, a barrier of ordinary people, angry and ashamed to have witnessed the unraveling of decency in real time. Karen tried to reclaim her authority, her voice shrill over the din. "Everyone, calm down. You're disrupting operations. This is a place of business." But she couldn't finish, the words choking off because a voice cut to the lobby from Jamal's pocket, clear and unyielding. Lena's voice, still on the open call, projected just enough for the nearest ears. Jamal, we've activated the incident log fully. Everything is being recorded, time-stamped, preserved for review. We have the footage from internal cams, audio from the mics. You have board authorization proceed, full executive power. Jamal didn't move, not yet, not in haste. He looked around the room at the customers pressing in, at Nia with tears streaking her cheeks, at the faces staring back not with pity, but with fire, with the shared flame of having seen wrong and refused to look away. This was no longer just about him, a single slight in a sea of them. This was a reckoning, broad and unyielding, for every unspoken bias, every buried complaint. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped away from the door, the crowd parting like a tide, toward Karen at the counter. You pushed me once, he said softly, his voice a velvet-wrapped blade. Then twice? You had every chance to de-escalate, to verify, to treat me as policy demands. He paused, letting the words sink in, his eyes locking on hers. And instead, you doubled down. You used that speaker to humiliate me, to broadcast out like a headline. You ignored protocol at every turn. You weaponized race without naming it. And now, you're going to face the consequences, not as a game, but as a reality you created. Karen looked like she'd been struck, her body recoiling, words failing her. You're bluffing, she stammered, her voice a threadbare whisper. You wouldn't come in here dressed like that, pretending to be ordinary. You wouldn't stoop to this theater. Jamal's voice dropped even lower, intimate in its intensity. I didn't pretend. I came as a customer, unarmed, unescorted, dressed in ordinary clothes, hoping to be treated with the same basic dignity you'd give any stranger walking through that door. What I got was suspicion from the start, contempt in every glance, and then violence when words failed you. I came because I wanted to believe this branch had changed, that the training, the policies, the vision had taken root. But it hasn't. You're still who you've always been, just bolder now, because you thought you were safe, untouchable in your little kingdom. He turned to Brian, who had taken several slow, shuffling steps back toward the teller line, his tie now fully askew. You shoved me twice, Jamal continued, his gaze piercing. You escalated without checking a single fact, without a glance at the screen that would have saved you. Brian's lips parted, but no sound came. He looked to Emily for support, a silent plea, but she turned away, her eyes fixed on the floor. This is serious, she mumbled, the fight drained from her. We didn't know we couldn't have. Jamal turned to the crowd then, his voice rising not with anger, but with the gravity of truth long overdue. That's always the excuse, isn't it? We didn't know that I was a CEO, that I was wealthy, that I had the right to be here, to demand service without interrogation. But the truth, the ugly staring truth, is that you didn't care to know, because what you thought you saw was a man who didn't belong, who could be dismissed, discarded. And in that assumption, you revealed more about yourselves than any title ever could. Sophia spoke aloud then, her words a gut punch. That's the part that hurts the most, the erasure before the explanation. Liam added, his stream chat a blur of emojis and exclamations. He shouldn't have to be a CEO to be treated like a person, like his word carries weight. Karen was sweating now, beads forming on her forehead, her blazer clinging uncomfortably. You can't fire us, she snapped, though her voice had lost all its earlier venom, reduced to a plea disguised as defiance. You have to go through process, protocol, investigations, hearings. Jamal pulled out his phone again, the screen lighting his face, and dialed a new line with deliberate taps. David, he said simply when the call connected, his tone shifting to the clipped efficiency of command. Seconds later, a second voice joined the fray, deep and authoritative. David Ellison, board member at Summit Financial Holdings, a silver-haired titan whose name alone commanded boardrooms. Jamal, David said, his words measured, we're monitoring the feed from here. Every angle, every word. You're clear to act. The board has voted unanimously to support full executive authority under your discretion. No holds barred. Karen blinked rapidly, confusion mounting. What does that mean? What are you doing? Jamal didn't answer her directly. He stepped beside Nia instead, looking her in the eye with genuine warmth amid the storm. You've been brave today, he said softly, just for her. Principled when it cost you. You're the kind of leader this bank needs. Steady human. Then, turning back the phone for all to hear, he said, begin processing staff terminations for Summit Portland branch. Karen Whitaker, branch manager. Brian Hayes, teller. Emily Klein, teller. Effective immediately. No appeals, no delays. Lena's voice was calm but firm, a procedural hammer falling. Confirmed, Mr. Washington. Processing now. Digital access revoked across the board. HR has been alerted. Regional security en route for escort. All logs preserved. Gasp swept through the room like a wind. Emily actually staggering back against the counter, her hand clutching the edge for support. You can't do this, she said, her voice breaking. This is insane, unfair. Nia stepped forward, her chin lifted. No, she countered. It's justice, long overdue. And then came the very large twist, a confession ripping through the remnants like a fault line. Brian, pale and shaking, his tie now a noose of regret, looked directly at Jamal, his eyes pleading for a sliver of mercy. There's something you need to know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper at first, but gaining volume as the word spilled. Karen told us not to serve certain customers, not outright, but in ways we couldn't ignore. She had a list unofficial, scribbled on a notepad in the break room. Names, descriptions, types to watch. She said delay service for anyone who looked off. Didn't match the usual crowd, you know? Stall them, question everything. The room fell silent again, a collective holding of breath. Karen's face went white as bone. That's a lie, she shouted, lunging forward. He's trying to save himself. Throw me under to keep his job. But Brian shook his head, slow and resolute, the weight lifting even as it crushed. It's not a lie. It's all true, every word. She said the bank didn't need those kind of accounts, the ones that might complain or demand more. If they got upset, just stall, then call escalation. Make it their problem. I went along. God, I went along because it was easier, but it's eating me now. Sophia gasped, her free hand covering her mouth. You had a playbook for discrimination, written delays for skin tone, for clothes? Liam's voice trembled as he narrated to the stream. This is bigger than just one day, one incident. It's a machine oiled with bias. Jamal stepped forward slowly, his presence commanding without effort. Thank you, Brian, he said, his voice icy calm, cutting deep. You still lose your job for your part in it, but your honesty, that might keep you out of court, out of deeper waters. Karen screamed, then a raw, animal sound. This isn't fair. You can't believe him over me. I've run this place for years. But the crowd already had. Belief had shifted like sand. A woman near the door shouted. We knew this place was toxic. Felt it every visit. Another man added, his phone still up. He's exposing it in real time. We're watching justice happen, unscripted and raw. Lena's voice returned to the phone, efficient as ever. Media has picked up Sophia's video. It's exploding. 350,000 views in minutes. Trending on X under hashtag #SummitExposed. Portland PD is looping in for statements. And Jamal, standing in the center of that lobby amid the gasps and glares, didn't look smug or victorious. He looked tired, bone-deep weary, but resolute as granite. This isn't about revenge, he said to everyone listening, customers, staff, the invisible millions beyond the walls. This is about integrity, about the soul of what we built. No one should be treated the way I was today. Not me with my billions, not you with your life savings, not anyone who walks through these doors seeking fairness. And starting now, right here, Summit Bank is changing from the ground up. Customers broke into applause then, not thunderous or showy, but steady, respectful, earned through the grit of the moment, hands clapping in waves from front to back. Jamal turned to remaining tellers, those who had stayed silent behind their screens, hands hovering but not intervening. If you've been silent until now, he said, his gaze sweeping them, that silence won't protect you much longer. It enabled this. Make your choice, step up or step out. And with that simple directive, the tide fully turned. The branch wasn't a bank anymore, a sterile hub of transactions. It had become a courtroom, open and unforgiving. The jury was the public. Phones streaming, hearts pounding. The sentence had already begun, and there was no staying hand. Karen Whitaker was still stammering denials, her words a jumbled mess of "you can't" and "this is revenge," when Jamal stepped fully into the center of the lobby. His plain white t-shirt, once unremarkable, now seemed like the sharpest suit in the room. Simple, stark, a symbol of the everyday armor too many wore into battle. There was no podium for him to command, no microphone to amplify. Yet his voice cut through the glass partitions and marble floors like a court ruling, clear and irrevocable. "I am Jamal Washington," he said, calm and unmistakable, letting the name settle like a stone in still water. Chief Executive Officer of Summit Financial Holdings, 42% shareholder, owner of this building, this branch, and yes, the chair you're standing behind, Karen, the desk you rule from, the very air you're breathing in this space I created. The silence was total, absolute. Even the clack of a pen dropping from a teller's station rang like thunder in the void. Customers stood motionless, transfixed. Emily froze like she'd forgotten how to breathe, her chest still. Brian's jaw dropped, unhinged. Karen's face turned ashen, the red of her lipstick now a garish clown mask against her pallor. But she still tried to speak, her voice a rasp. This is not possible. You tricked us. You came in disguise like some spy." Jamal raised a hand, not to silence her harshly, but to spare the lobby from another second of her flailing excuses, a gesture of mercy amid judgment. "I came the same way every customer comes in," he said, his tone even instructional almost. "Unarmed, unescorted, dressed in ordinary clothes that anyone you might wear on a day off. Hoping, no, expecting, to be treated with the same basic dignity you'd extend to a stranger, a neighbor, a friend. What I received instead was layers of suspicion from the moment I approached the counter, contempt in every word and glance, and an outright violence when your assumptions met resistance. And I want every person in this building, every teller, every manager, every silent observer, to remember that moment, because it ends now, today, in this room." His phone remained in his hand, still connected to Lena, still recording every heartbeat of the scene, a digital sentinel. "Lena," he said evenly, without flourish, "you may now proceed with the full protocol." Her voice, cool and exact as a surgeon's scalpel, echoed back to the speakerphone, audible to the front rows. Karen Whitaker, branch manager, terminated. Brian Hayes, teller, terminated. Emily Klein, teller, terminated. Effective immediately under CEO Emergency Authority. Section 9C of the Employee Handbook. Digital credentials deactivated. HR notified for final paperwork. Regional security notified for immediate escort from premises. Karen lurched forward as if to protest, her hand slamming the counter, but her monitor blinked black behind her in that instant. Access revoked in real time, the screen of void reflecting her stunned face. "This is illegal," she cried, her voice breaking into a wail. "You didn't give notice, no investigation, no due process." Jamal turned to her fully then, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You ran the investigation yourself the moment you chose to profile me based on a glance, a stereotype. You conducted the trial when you humiliated me over that speaker, broadcasting your bias for all to hear. And you executed the sentence when you tried to physically eject me from a bank I own, a space I envisioned as safe. You just didn't know I was watching, not from afar, but right here, bearing witness to your choices." Brian didn't say a word in defense. He lowered his head, hands clasped in front of him like a child awaiting punishment. His earlier confession, hanging heavy. Emily, still guarding the drawer that held Jamal's confiscated card, unlocked it with shaking fingers, the click loud in the hush, and placed the card on the counter with reverent care. She didn't speak. No apology crossed her lips. Her silence was soaked in guilt, thick and suffocating. But Jamal didn't linger on her. His eyes had moved to Nia, who was standing still amid the whirlwind, tears just beginning to pool at the edges of her eyes, her hands clasped to steady them. "Nia Johnson," Jamal said, his voice softening. a beacon in the storm. You're being promoted effective immediately to assistant branch lead, with corporate services following up on the details tomorrow. Your courage today, your humanity in the face of pressure, it didn't go unnoticed, and it won't go unrewarded. Gasps rippled through the crowd once more, a wave of approval. Sophia mouthed a silent yes, her eyes shining, and Liam caught it all on camera, narrating softly, from teller to leader in seconds, because she chose right when it counted. Nia blinked, stunned into stillness, a hand rising to her mouth. "Sir, Mr. Washington, I didn't do it for recognition," she whispered, her voice thick. "I did it because it was right, because no one deserves that treatment." Jamal gave the smallest nod, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "That's exactly why you're being recognized, why leaders like you are the future of this place." He turned back to the lobby at large, his voice rising not in volume, but in weight, carrying the gravity of change. Let this serve as a line in the sand drawn here today. Summit Bank is undergoing reform, immediate, sweeping, non-negotiable. Starting right now, any employee caught ignoring bias complaints, engaging in microaggressions, withholding service based on appearance, race, or any other marker, or covering for others who do, will be removed. No suspensions to placate, no retraining seminars as slaps on the wrist. Removed, fully and finally. If you cannot see all customers as equals, worthy of trust until proven otherwise, then you do not belong here. Not in this branch, not in this company. The tension in the air didn't break with those words. It shifted, transforming from outrage to awe, a hush of possibility. Jamal wasn't angry anymore, his shoulders relaxing fractionally. He was rebuilding in real time, brick by spoken brick. Karen, desperate to salvage any footing, tried one last grasp. "This is a disaster for you, Washington," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "You'll lose half your staff overnight. Good people, loyal." Jamal turned to her, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "I'd rather lose staff than lose our soul, the trust that keeps us standing. And if half go, we'll hire twice as many who understand that." And then came the huge twist, a ripple from the underbelly. Brian took a step forward, still trembling. But this time it wasn't from fear alone. It was from release, a dam breaking. "Mr. Washington," he began, not daring to meet Jamal's eyes fully, his gaze on the floor. "I need to say something, on the record, for everyone." The room hushed again, expectant. Jamal gave a nod, simple and permissive. "Speak, freely, without fear." Brian cleared his throat, and for the first time since the morning's calm shattered, his voice sounded human, stripped of bluster. "Karen instructed us to delay service for certain customers, not calling it profiling outright, but we all knew. She'd say things like, 'Make them wait, see if they're serious. If they don't dress right, they don't bank right.' And she told us to tag account for extra review if they looked suspicious, which meant anyone who didn't look like the investors she was used to schmoozing, white, suited, Wall Street polish." Karen gasped, a strangled sound. "You coward," she screamed, rounding on him. "You agreed with me. You said the same things, enforced them." Brian nodded, slow and pained. "And I regret every one of them, every delay, every tag. But I'm not letting you lie anymore, not alone. You made it policy, whispered it in huddles, enforced it with glares. It wasn't just you, it was us, but you led the charge." Jamal didn't react immediately. He let the silence absorb Brian's confession, let it seep into the walls, the witnesses. A few customers whispered to each other, heads close. One woman muttered, "This explains everything I went through here last month. Hours for a deposit, questions that felt like interrogations." Another nodded vigorously. "They lost my check for 3 days, said it was processing, but I saw them cash other same day." Jamal spoke slowly then, his words deliberate. "Thank you, Brian. Your confession doesn't erase what you did, the shoves, the stalls, but it reveals what was hidden in shadows. That's something, a start. Hold on to it." Brian's eyes dropped, relief and shame mingling. Karen looked like she might scream or cry or collapse under the weight. She settled for none, her body rigid. She simply turned and walked toward the back door, heels clicking erratically. only to find it locked, access revoked, the keypad beeping denial. Emily stood there too, ashen and silent, the door a mocking barrier. It wouldn't open for any of them anymore. They weren't part of Summit, not in this new dawn. Then Lena's voice returned, crisp through the line. Jamal, update from PR. Sophia's video has hit 500,000 views in under 20 minutes. It's been picked up by Portland Daily, Northwest Consumer Rights, and a financial equity watchdog group. We're in headlines. CEO ousted from own bank. Response drafted and ready. Jamal nodded once to himself. Let them watch. Let them see what accountability looks like. Not polished, but real. He turned to the lobby, to the stunned customers still clustered, to the tellers with hands off their keyboards, frozen in flux. This isn't just a message to Summit Bank, to this branch, he said, his voice a clarion call. This is a message to every institution that thinks silence protects power, that shaming someone in public based on skin, clothing, or zip code is just standard procedure, a quirk to overlook. Those days are over, buried here today. He walked to the counter then, his steps measured, picked up his card with unhurried fingers, and slipped it into his wallet. A simple act reclaiming normalcy. He didn't demand the withdrawal service, didn't insist on the $2.5 million. He didn't need to. His presence had already transformed the space, not through rage or retribution, but through a form raw and radiant. We will rebuild from here, he said to the room, to the phones capturing it all, but not with the same foundation. That one just cracked wide open, exposed to the light. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, his voice dropping to underscore the finality, Emily Klein is banned from any future rehire at Summit or any of its partners. Her file will reflect this incident in full detail, a permanent mark. Emily looked like she'd been slapped, her hand rising to her cheek instinctively. You can't do that, she whispered, horror dawning. Jamal met her eyes, steady and unblinking. I just did, and I can't because trust once broken demands more than words to mend. And in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifted for good, irrevocable as a fault line sealed. The applause that erupted after Jamal fired the branch staff faded into a heavy, expectant hush, like the pause before a judge's gavel falls for the last time. No one moved. The lobby held its breath. Jamal remained standing in the center, his presence a quiet command. His tone now was even more deliberate, measured as a heartbeat. Effective immediately, he announced, the words carrying to every corner. This branch is under operational lockdown. No further transactions will be processed today. No deposits. No withdrawals. No wires. All appointments canceled. Systems paused. The only business being conducted here right now is justice. Raw, unflinching, and thorough. Behind him, Lena's voice echoed through his phone again, confirming without delay. Operations paused across the board. Access to internal systems limited to CEO and designated personnel only. Reform template deployed to Summit Portland branch. Bias audit protocols initiating now. Then came David Ellison, the board member, chiming in on the second line, his tone one of seasoned resolve. Jamal Media is reporting live. CNN affiliate just looped a clip. I've authorized a PR response. Full transparency, commitment to overhaul. You're clear to proceed with structural reform. No red tape. Jamal didn't look rattled by the whirlwind. In fact, he looked calmer than he had all morning, the storm's eye at his core. This isn't about punishing a few people in the heat of the moment, he said, turning slowly to face the stunned tellers still at their stations, their name tags glinting under the lights. This is about restoring integrity to every layer. We cannot afford to leave this culture intact. Not even in the corners, the quiet complicities that let bias fester. It poisons us all. He turned to Nia, his gaze warm amid the steel. You'll be working with corporate compliance directly starting today. No ramp up, straight in. I want a full review of every discrimination complaint logged here since 2018. Every email, every note, every whisper that made it to paper. No file stays buried. No story unheard. Nia nodded, stunned but steady, wiping a stray tear with the back of her hand. I'll handle it, Mr. Washington. Every one, I promise. Customers broke into murmurs of approval then, a soft wave of "that's right," and about time, some filming anew with nods of respect, others whispering their own stories in clusters, bonds forming in the shared catharsis. But the moment of resolution was short-lived, fragile as glass, because what came next ripped open something far deeper, a vein of truth long concealed. As Jamal approached the teller line, Emily gone to back, Karen locked out and pacing, Brian silent and slumped. One of the remaining employees, a teller no older than 23 with freckles and a fresh out of college nervousness, raised a hesitant hand from Station 4. "Sir, Mr. Washington, I think you should know something," he said, his voice quavering but pushing through. Jamal turned to him fully, his expression open. "Speak freely. Now's the time for truths, all of them." The young man glanced nervously around the room, at the eyes on him, then back to Jamal, steeling himself. Last fall, Karen had a policy. She called it selective screening. It wasn't on paper, official or anything, but she told us verbally in shift huddles. Certain clients should be treated with extra scrutiny, extra steps. She never said directly, race or color. But we all understood who she meant, the ones who didn't fit the profile she liked. The room stilled again, a fresh hush descending. Liam lowered his phone just slightly, his eyes widening behind his glasses. Jamal said nothing at first, only waited, his silence an invitation. The teller continued, words tumbling faster now. There were at least 3 written complaints from customers who said they felt racially profiled. One was a black business owner coming in to deposit weekly revenue from his food truck, clean money, all legit. The other 2 were a Latino couple opening a joint savings and a Filipino nurse cashing a check after overtime. Karen told us to delay their transactions. "Let them stew," she said, then later told Brian to remove their names from the follow-up queue, bury the escalations. Jamal's stare shifted sharply toward Brian, who had lifted his head at the mention. "Is that true?" Jamal asked, his voice low but unyielding. Brian hesitated, but the moment had passed for half measures. The dam was broken wide. "It is," he admitted quietly, his shoulders slumping further. "We didn't log the complaints properly, funneled them to dead-end folders. We shredded the hard copies after scanning fakes." Several customers gasped, hands to mouths, the horror fresh. "You destroyed formal complaints of discrimination?" A voice from the back cried. Jamal's voice remained steady, but cold now, steel wrapped in silk. "On whose order?" Whose hand signed off? Brian swallowed hard, the lump visible in his throat. "Karen's. Always Karen's," she said, was streamlining, but we knew. Sophia muttered, her camera refocused. This wasn't just bias slipping through. This was a cover-up, deliberate and deep. Liam nodded, his stream chat ablaze. "This is a civil rights violation in a suit and tie, erasing voices to protect profits." Jamal stood straighter, the pieces locking into a larger mosaic. "Lena," he said into the phone, a command crisp, "I want every branch's complaint logs for the last 24 months. Cross-reference with staffing records, executive overrides, transaction delays. If there's a pattern here, a web of suppression, find it, map it, expose it." Lena's answer was immediate, efficient. "Already in motion, sir. Compliance team is escalating forensic level. Expect prelims by end of day." The weight of the moment settled over the room again, heavier now. But this time it wasn't confined to people inside. The phones in customers' hands were streaming, posting, sharing every confession, every gasp. Not for clout or clicks, but for truth, for exposure, for the justice that had slumbered too long. Jamal looked around and saw in their faces, black, white, brown, young, elderly, professionals and laborers, each seeing a piece of themselves in the unraveling, a mirror to their own brushes with the invisible walls. And he wasn't finished. The fire in him demanded more. "This was never just about a $2.5 million withdrawal," he said softly, his voice threading to the hush like a river finding its course. "It was about something far more valuable. Accountability, decency, the fairness we promise on every brochure and app screen." He turned to David over the phone. "The board members' line still open. We're not just firing people anymore, David, not reactive strikes. We're restructuring from the inside out. New mandatory training with real teeth, accountability teams in every region, an internal whistleblower fund seeded with $15 million for protections and payouts. And every complaint, every last one from now back to founding, will be seen, heard, acted on. David replied without pause, his tone one of alliance. You have full board backing. Jamal unanimous. The message is clear and loud. Bias isn't just bad optics. It's bad banking, eroding trust dollar by dollar. Make it so. Jamal nodded once, resolute. Then let's build a new foundation, one that holds, that heals. 3 days after the incident at Summit Bank's downtown Portland branch, the world had tilted on its axis. Sophia's video had passed 15 million views, a viral wildfire jumping platforms from X to TikTok to Instagram Reels, every major outlet running it on loop, CNN with grave anchors, MSNBC with panel debates, even the Wall Street Journal bearing a cautious op-ed in its finance section. Headlines screamed phrases like, CEO profiled his own bank, shocking undercover sting turns tables, and justice in real time. Firings follow fraud accusation gone wrong. But Jamal Washington didn't do a single interview, didn't sit for a morning show puff piece or post a triumphant statement on X. He went back to work quietly, strategically, his office a hive of calls and audits, the city skyline a backdrop to blueprints redrawn. And by the end of that week, 5 more Summit branches, from Portland to Denver, had entered internal review for complaint suppression, whispers of patterns unearthed in dusty servers. Over 24 employees across the network have been removed, not as scapegoats tossed to the mob, but as part of methodical, evidence-based house cleaning. Logs poured over, testimonies cross-checked, decisions cold and clear. Jamal never raised his voice in those meetings. He never called it a purge or vendetta. He called it realignment, a surgical reset to true north. And in that realignment, Nia Johnson became more than a promoted teller with a new title on her badge. She became the face of Summit's newly formed Equity Integrity Team, a rotating cadre of frontline employees, tellers, clerks, managers like her, empowered to review, report, and correct bias incidents from the inside out, their voices amplified where they once echoed unheard. She stood up. Jamal had said simply at the press conference he finally gave 2 weeks later, standing not behind a podium but beside it, his T-shirt swapped for a crisp button-down but no tie, grounding the moment. When standing up came with risk, with real cost, she chose humanity over hierarchy. That's the culture we're building now. Brave, inclusive, unbreakable. The room of reporters had nodded, pencils scratching, but Nia, seated in the front row, had felt the weight of it, the trust placed in her hands. But not everyone applauded the swift hand. There were protests outside branches, small but vocal, some calling the firings hasty overreactions, others whispering that Jamal was weaponizing race for PR points. Online forums buzzed with contrarians. What about due process for staff? But the facts were solid as rebar, patterns and logs undeniable, stories from affected customers pouring in by the hundred, real and raw. Jamal let the policies speak for themselves, no defensive tweets, no spin cycles. And in doing so, he created not just a headline grabbing the moment, but a blueprint for institutional self-correction, a model email to competitors and regulators alike. Audit. Act. Amend. And yet, beneath the reforms stacking like new bricks, beneath the headlines fading to footnotes, beneath the applause and the backlash simmering, something deeper remained unresolved, a shadow lurking until the final twist emerged, quiet but shattering. It came not from Brian's halting confession, not from Emily's stunned silence, not even from Karen's frantic denials as security escorted her out. It came from an anonymous tip slipped into Lena's office inbox 3 weeks later, time-stamped from a VPN in Florida, a former regional manager, now retired on a golf course pension, who admitted in careful prose that Karen's pattern of discrimination had been known for years, flagged in memos that gathered dust. Why never acted on? Because, as the tipster wrote in a gut-wrenching line, she kept minority accounts low risk. They didn't push for big loans that might default. They deposited steadily, fees low. They rarely challenged her decisions. Her delays made the branch numbers look stable by managing out the high contact, ones who asked questions. No one wanted to rock the boat, Profits whispered louder than principles. The revelation sent a deeper chill through Jamal's office than anything uttered in that lobby, a cold draft from the foundations. It wasn't just one bad manager, a rogue branch. It was a tolerated system, a quiet, complicit culture where discrimination wasn't shouted from rooftops but baked into the daily grind, denials masked with smiles, bias hidden beneath spreadsheets of efficiency metrics, escalations rerouted to oblivion. Jamal closed his office door that afternoon, the city lights twinkling indifferently below, and read the email twice, the words blurring slightly before he blinked them clear. Then he called Lena, his voice steady but edged. "We're going national with this," he said. "No preamble. Not just internal reform. Band-aids on bullet wounds. We're launching the Diversity Access Index. Every summit bank scored not by profit margins or transaction volume, but by trust metrics, complaint resolution rates, demographic service equity, whistleblower uptake, public dashboards, quarterly reports, transparency as policy." Lena paused on the line, the implications dawning. "That changes everything," she said, off-threading her tone. "Exactly," Jamal replied, leaning back in his chair. "And it's about damn time." 3 months later, that change became visible, not in fanfare, but quietly, powerfully, like roots pushing through soil. Branches began holding community listening sessions, folding chairs in lobbies, coffee served, stories shared without judgment, elders recounting frozen accounts, entrepreneurs venting loan denials, immigrants navigating language barriers turned away. All teller training was overhauled. Not dry videos, but immersive simulations, role plays drawn from real complaints, empathy metrics baked in. Equity officers, diverse, trained, empowered, were assigned to every region, their badges a signal of shift, and a new scholarship fund, quietly backed by Jamal himself with an 8-figure seed, began offering grants to first-generation finance students from underserved neighborhoods, tuition, mentorships, internships at Summit, a pipeline to rewrite the industry's face. At the heart of all, Jamal remained still focused, still the man in the white T-shirt under the suits. Not the viral CO splashed across feeds, but builder cleaning his house. Starting with the lobby floor, he had once been shoved across in front of strangers, the marble now polished but scarred in memory. And what about that branch on Oak Street, the epicenter? It didn't shutter its doors in disgrace. It transformed, reborn in the fire. New faces filled the teller line, younger, diverse, trained in the new ways. Nia Johnson led them now, her office a glass-walled nook overlooking the space. A wall of customer testimonials filled the spot where suspicion once brewed, plaques and photos under warm spotlights. Service with dignity changed my trust in banks forever. And at its center, under soft lighting that invited rather than interrogated, a plaque read simply, etched in gold. This branch changed not because it had to, but because one man and many voices reminded us all that silence has a cost, and courage pays dividends eternal. And now, if you followed this story to its close, riding every twist and turn, every gasp and revelation, I'll ask you just one question. Not for clicks, not for comments to boost the algo, but for reflection, for the quiet space after the storm. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong, sized up and dismissed, only to later realize you were the one holding the key, the power, the truth, the change? If so, this story was for you, a mirror and a map. And if not, remember this tale well. True leadership isn't about power wielded like a club. It's about presence. Showing up ordinary, seeing clearly, refusing to bend. Jamal didn't lead by raising his voice to a roar. He led by refusing to lower his standards, by standing firm in jeans and a T-shirt. So the next time someone underestimates you, glances away, locks the drawer, questions your place, let them, smile faintly. And then, when the moment ripens, show them who's really signing the paycheck. Not with vengeance, but with vision. Thanks for watching. Hit like if this moved you. Subscribe for more stories that stir the soul. And drop that city in the comments. Until next time, stay bold.